They didn't argue. They didn't shout. They didn't break a single rule. And still, the boarding door closed in their face. If you're over 70 and planning to fly in 2026, I need you to listen very carefully. Because right now, older travelers are being denied boarding at airports across the country. Not because they did anything wrong, but because the rules moved quietly and no one made sure you knew where they landed. This isn't a rumor. It's not a maybe someday scenario. It's already happening. I've watched it with my own eyes. People who arrived early folded their suit jackets neatly into carry-ons, printed their boarding passes, double-checked their gate, only to be told calmly and firmly that they would not be getting on the plane. They walked away from the counter confused, embarrassed, sometimes holding back tears, asking themselves, "What did I do?" Here's the most unsettling part. Your experience no longer shields you. 20, 30, even 40 years of flying doesn't protect you from these changes. In fact, it can work against you. The habits and assumptions that served you well for decades are now the very things causing seniors to be stopped at security, turned away at check-in, and left behind at the gate. You might be thinking, I've flown my whole life. I know how this works. I know airports. I know the routine. And I believe you. You probably do know how it used to work. What you need to understand now is this. The system you're familiar with is not the system you're walking into anymore. Between late 2025 and early 2026, several things shifted. Identification rules tightened. Airline flexibility shrank. Security procedures changed in ways that affect older passengers more than most, especially those who have been traveling the longest. These changes didn't arrive with big signs at the airport entrance. They didn't show up as TV ads reminding seniors to check their documents. They slipped in through quiet policy updates, software changes, and internal memos. Most people never saw them coming. And when you don't know a rule exists, you have no way to prepare for it or defend yourself against it. That's how older travelers end up stranded while watching the plane they were supposed to be on back away from the gate. My goal tonight is simple. I want to make absolutely sure that doesn't happen to you. Here's why this feels so unfair, and why once people finally understand what's going on, they replay the experience in their heads over and over. For decades, flying rewarded familiarity. You learned the steps. You knew what mattered and what didn't. You figured out how early you had to arrive, what you could carry, how security worked. Airport travel became part muscle memory, part common sense. The new environment does not reward familiarity. It doesn't care how many miles you've flown or how well you know the concourse layout. It cares about whether every box is checked, every form is correct, and every policy is followed exactly. No more, no less. Gate agents and TSA officers now have far less room to use their judgment than they did a few years ago. They're not allowed to say, "You'll be fine this time," or "I know you, you're okay." Their jobs and sometimes their contracts now depend on following the rule book, with almost no exceptions. So when something doesn't meet the standard, an ID, a document, a medical detail, the no can feel deeply personal even when it isn't. Seniors are getting caught in this more than other groups because many of these new rules collide directly with everyday realities of aging, older forms of identification, long-standing medical routines, invisible mobility challenges, medications that have been a normal part of life for years. None of those are mistakes, but under the updated procedures, they can be enough to stop you cold. That's why so many older travelers are blindsided. They didn't blow off the rules. They simply never knew the rules had changed. Let me ground this in something real so you understand what's at stake. Not long ago, I watched a 73-year-old man arrive early for a flight he had been looking forward to for months. He was flying to his daughter's wedding. He had his suit folded carefully in his carry-on. His boarding pass was printed and tucked into a folder. He'd confirmed the ride, checked the gate, done everything exactly the way he always had. He had flown for business in his younger years. He'd flown for vacations. He'd never had a problem. But when he reached security, the officer took his ID, looked at it closely, and shook their head. His driver's license didn't meet the new federal standard for air travel. He had never heard of this. He had never needed to think about it before. The agent didn't argue with him. They didn't want to ruin his day, but their hands were tied. The rules were the rules. No matter how calm he stayed, no matter how many boarding passes he could show from the past, that flight boarded without him. The plane left. The wedding started, and he was still standing in an airport. He didn't miss it because he was careless. He didn't miss it because he was irresponsible. He missed it because the regulations moved, and nobody told him. I am not sharing this to scare you. I'm sharing it because what happened to him was preventable. Every single failure point in that story is something you can avoid with information and preparation. That's what we're going to do together. Now, I'm going to walk you through the key things you must know before you fly in 2026 if you're over 70. These are not casual tips. They are not optional extras. They are the difference between being waved through to your gate and being quietly told, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. We're going to talk about what changed, why it matters, where seniors are getting tripped up, and exactly how you can protect yourself before you ever leave home. You do not need to be afraid to fly. You do not need to feel overwhelmed by all of this. What you need is to be informed about how things work now, not how they used to. Once you know that, you can move through the airport with your confidence restored. Let's start with the single biggest reason seniors are being stopped, and in some cases turned away before they ever reach the gate. Identification. For years, a standard driver's license was enough. You handed it over, the agent glanced at the name and photo, and you were on your way. It didn't matter when it was issued or what kind of symbol was on it. If it looked official and wasn't expired, it worked. That era is gone. As the new standards phase in completely, the system no longer cares how long you've held that license or how many times you've successfully used it to fly. The only question now is, does your ID meet the exact federal requirements for air travel? And this is where countless seniors are getting blindsided. Many older adults renewed their licenses years ago before these standards existed, or before their state fully adopted them. They haven't needed to think about it since. In their minds, their license is just current. They assume that means acceptable. They arrive early, stand in line, hand over the card, and are told it is not valid for flying. The shock is instant. Panic follows, and in that moment, there is no simple last-minute fix. If your ID does not meet the federal Real ID standard, TSA officers are not allowed to let you pass. It's not a warning, and it's not a suggestion. It's a hard stop. That is why this particular rule is quietly tearing trips apart. You may be thinking, well, I renewed my license recently enough, so I'm probably fine. But unless you've actually looked, you don't know. And guessing is too risky. Now here's what matters. Your driver's license must be Real ID compliant to be used as your sole ID for domestic flights. How do you tell? There should be a special symbol on the front of the card, usually a star. In some states, it's a star inside a circle. In others, it's a star cut into the shape of the state. The exact design varies, and that's part of the confusion, but the bottom line is simple. If there is no star at all on the front, that license is not Real ID compliant, and TSA will not accept it as travel ID. I've watched people try everything to get around this. They show boarding passes from the past. They explain they used the same ID last year with no problem. They ask for a supervisor. In the end, nothing changes. The agents are not passing judgment on your character. They are checking compliance. And if the symbol isn't there, they cannot override the rule. If you check your license and realize there is no Real ID star, you are not tied out of options, but you are out of time if you wait until the day of travel to act. A valid U.S. passport or passport card will still work regardless of whether your license is Real ID compliant. Many older adults do not have a current passport or haven't used one in years. If that's your situation, you have two main paths: renew or apply for a passport, or visit the DMV to upgrade your license to Real ID. Whichever you choose, do it early. DMV appointments are filling up fast as more people start realizing they need the upgrade. Passport processing times can stretch unexpectedly, especially during busy seasons. This is not something to place on a someday list. Take your ID out today. Right now, if you can look for that star, and if it's missing, make a plan. Don't wait until an agent at the airport is the one to tell you. Now, let's move to something a lot of people have heard only in fragments medical documentation. There's a rumor going around that once you hit a certain age, you need a doctor's note just to get on a plane. That is not true. Airlines cannot deny you boarding simply because you are over 70. Age by itself is not a medical condition. However, there are particular medical situations where documentation is now required, and those rules tightened quietly toward the end of 2025. If you need supplemental oxygen during the flight, if you rely on a wheelchair for more than short distances, or if you have a condition that could reasonably require medical attention in the air, most airlines now insist on some form of medical clearance filed before the day of travel. Not at check-in, not at the gate before. This is where problems arise. The requirements are often buried on airline websites. The names for the forms differ. One calls it a MEDIF medical information form. Another calls it fitness TOEFL documentation, but they all amount to the same thing: a signed confirmation from your doctor that you are medically stable to fly. Here's how to handle this without stress or confusion. If you know you use oxygen, require significant mobility assistance, or live with a condition that could cause concern in the air, call your airline at least 4,872 hours before your trip. When you get through, you don't need to launch into your entire medical history. Simply say, "I need to submit medical clearance for my upcoming flight. Please email me the form you require." That sentence signals the process immediately. They will send you a form or a link. You bring that to your doctor, they fill it out and sign it, and you return it according to the airline's instructions. Once it's attached to your reservation, it shows up on the agent's screen when you check in and at the gate. There's no guessing, no last-minute judgment calls, no sudden "we can't let you board." If you're thinking "I'm okay most of the time, I just use a cane or I have a heart condition," but it's controlled. This is where I want you to be cautious in your own favor. It is far, far better to have documentation no one asked for than to be questioned without anything on file. I have watched passengers turned away because a gate agent had a concern and there was no medical clearance attached to the booking. The agent wasn't trying to embarrass them. They were afraid of being held responsible if something happened mid-flight without proper clearance. A little preparation ahead of time removes that pressure for you and for them. Next, let's talk about something that seems small but causes enormous trouble at security: how you carry your prescription medications. For years, many people have relied on weekly pill organizers, little unlabeled cases, or mixed pill containers when traveling. They're convenient. They're familiar. No one questioned them much. That's less true. Now, TSA officers are under more pressure to verify that medications, especially controlled substances or unfamiliar pills, are legitimate and belong to the person carrying them. If medications are loose in a plastic case with no labels, the officer has no way to confirm what they are. When they can't confirm, they're now far more likely to confiscate, especially if the medication looks like something that could be misused. I've seen older travelers pulled aside, their bag opened, their pill organizer emptied out on the table. The pills aren't in pharmacy bottles. There's no label with a name, no prescription slip. The officers aren't being cruel. They just don't have what they need to say yes. Sometimes crucial daily medications are taken away. That's a terrifying experience, especially when the pills are for heart conditions, blood pressure, blood sugar, or other critical issues. Here's how you avoid that entirely. Every prescription medication you take through security should be in an original pharmacy labeled container. The label should clearly show your name, the name of the medication, dosage, and prescribing doctor. If you don't want to bring a full 30 or 90-day supply, Go to your pharmacy and say, I'm traveling and I need a smaller labeled bottle with just enough for the trip. Mosties will do this for you at no charge. They print a second label and put an appropriate number of pills in a small bottle. Keep all of these in your carry-on, not in checked luggage. Checked bags go missing or get delayed every single day. Your essential medications cannot disappear with them. For liquid medications like insulin, certain eye drops, liquid opioids, or other prescriptions, you are allowed to exceed the normal liquid limit, but you must declare them. Don't try to slip them through and hope for the best. At the start of the screening process, look at the officer and say calmly, I have medically necessary liquids in my bag that exceed the standard limit. They may ask to see them and test them. It adds a couple of minutes, then you're done. To make this even smoother, especially with injectable meds like insulin pens, carry a printed copy of your prescription or a brief note from your doctor. It's not strictly required, but in practice, it reassures the officer instantly and can shave 10 or 15 minutes off the process. What security needs is verification. When you make that easy, the tension disappears. Now, let's move up to the part of the process that makes a lot of seniors most nervous, the security checkpoint itself. You've probably heard of TSA PreCheck, and yes, it's a great program. You keep your shoes on. You leave your laptop in your bag. The line is often shorter and the pace is gentler, but there's something many older travelers don't know. Even if you don't have PreCheck, there are already built-in accommodations for older passengers in standard screening. If you are 75 or older, TSA guidelines allow you to keep your shoes and light jacket on in the regular line. That policy has been around for some time, but because it's not announced loudly, many seniors never take advantage of it. The officers are supposed to recognize your age, but in a busy checkpoint, things get rushed. If you're over 75, when you reach the front, you can simply say, I'm 75, and keep your shoes and light outer W wear on unless an officer specifically instructs otherwise for an unusual reason. If you're over 70 but under 75, this is where programs like PreCheck are worth serious consideration. A single enrollment fee covers 5 years, and many credit cards now reimburse that fee. For people who travel even once or twice a year, the reduction in standing, bending, and lifting is often worth it. Whether you're using age-based accommodations or PreCheck, the goal is the same. Reduce the physical strain and confusion at security so that the process feels manageable, not overwhelming. Now let's move from security to boarding, because this is where I see many seniors struggling unnecessarily and sometimes getting hurt because they don't know what they're entitled to. Pre-boarding airlines are required by federal law to allow passengers who need extra time or help to board before general boarding. That includes many older adults, but the way it's announced can make it easy to miss. You might hear something like, "We'll now begin pre-boarding for those who need extra time or assistance," but they don't specifically say seniors or older travelers. A lot of people over 70 feel awkward stepping forward. They don't want to be seen as needy or pushy. Please hear this clearly. Pre-boarding is not cheating. It's not taking advantage. It exists for your safety and for the smooth operation of the flight. When you board early, you have time to walk down the jet bridge without being rushed. You can get to your seat, put your bag away with help from the crew if needed, and get seated before the aisle fills up with people in a hurry, overhead bin slamming, bags knocking into shoulders. From the crew's perspective, older passengers who need extra time boarding first make everything easier and safer, not just for you, but for everyone else. You qualify for pre-boarding if it takes you longer to walk down the jet bridge. If you use a cane or walker, if lifting a bag overhead is difficult, if you feel unsteady in crowds, or if you simply need more time to get settled without pressure. Age is not the rule, need is. But many people over 70 have needs that fall into that category, even if they feel reluctant to admit it. Here is a simple script you can use at the gate to make this easy and comfortable. Walk up to the counter, smile, and say, I'd like to request pre-boarding because I need a bit of extra time to get settled. That's all. You don't need to explain your medical history. You don't need to apologize. The agent will flag your reservation and call you during the pre-boarding phase. There is no fee. It does not change your seat. It is not an inconvenience. It can, however, prevent a fall, a twisted back, or an exhausting struggle. I have watched so many older travelers wait for their assigned group, then try to navigate a crowded aisle with people behind them, pushing forward, overhead bins filling fast, and the pressure to move quickly, causing stress and instability. I've seen bags slip, canes catch, people nearly lose their footing. When those same travelers pre-board, the entire tone shifts. There is space, there is calm, crew members are available and focused. The risk drops dramatically. If this describes you, please use this protection. You are not asking for special favor. You are using a system that exists for you. Now, let's talk about mobility devices and wheelchairs, because this is another area where updated procedures can surprise people. If you use a cane, walker, scooter, or wheelchair, you may find that TSA and airport staff handle these differently than they did years ago. Devices are often swabbed for explosive residue. They may be sent through a separate scanner. You may be pulled to a slightly different area for screening. This does not mean you are being singled out for suspicion. It means the equipment is being checked according to standard procedures. The key is to communicate as soon as you reach security. You can say, I use a mobility device and will need some assistance with screening. That sets expectations clearly. If you can walk a few steps safely, officers may ask you to walk through a scanner while your device is checked separately. If you cannot stand or walk without risk, you do not have to. You are allowed to remain seated in your wheelchair or scooter and be screened while seated. If anyone pushes you to stand when it feels unsafe, you can calmly say, I need to remain seated for screening due to mobility limitations. If the situation still feels confusing, ask for a supervisor. Supervisors are trained specifically to handle accessibility situations and can correct misunderstandings quickly. If your walker or wheelchair folds and you are able, collapsing it before the scanner can speed things up. If you can't manage that alone, ask for help. That's what they're there for. The biggest mistake older travelers make here is trying to tough it out in silence, standing when they shouldn't, rushing to keep up with others, agreeing to things that increase their risk of falling. You are not causing trouble by asking for the accommodation the rules already allow. Wheelchair assistance is another area many people misunderstand. If you assume you can decide at the last minute, I'll get a wheelchair at the airport if I need it. That may no longer work reliably. Airlines now contract with outside companies to provide wheelchair services, and staffing is often based on how many requests are in the system ahead of time. If you arrive needing help, but did not request it when booking or at least 48 hours before your flight, there may be a significant wait. I have seen older passengers miss boarding because the wheelchair they needed simply wasn't available quickly enough. If you know walking long distances is tiring, if standing in lines is painful, if navigating a big airport is more than you want to handle, request wheelchair assistance when you book your ticket. If you already booked, call the airline now and add it. Ask for help from check-in to the gate and, if needed, from the gate to baggage claim at your destination. There is no charge for this. It is your right under accessibility laws. You are not taking something away from someone else. You are securing a service that exists so you can travel safely. Finally, I want to talk about something that often goes completely unmentioned: invisible disabilities. Not every challenge shows up as a device you can see. Many older adults live with chronic pain, arthritis, shortness of breath, balance problems, early cognitive changes, anxiety, and crowds, or other conditions that make travel harder. Even though they look fine from the outside, you are still entitled to accommodations in those situations. Airlines and TSA officers cannot guess what you need, and they are not allowed to assume. That's why it can feel like no one cares, when really they just don't know. You don't have to share deeply personal medical details to get help. You can say something as simple as, I have a disability that isn't visible, and I need a little extra time assistance too. Then be specific about what you need. Extra time, early boarding, help with bags, a quieter boarding process, or an escort through busy areas. These kinds of adjustments are considered reasonable. They don't disrupt the flight, they don't change rules, they just make the existing process safer and more manageable for you. Asking for them is not complaining or being high maintenance. It's using the structure that already exists to protect you. How to pack and present prescription medications so they aren't questioned or confiscated at security. What age-based accommodations you're entitled to at TSA, and when programs like pre-check can make a big difference. That pre-boarding is a right when you need extra time, not a favor you're begging for. How wheelchair assistance really works and why requesting it in advance is critical. That invisible disabilities are real, valid, and protected, and that you can ask for help without sharing your whole medical history. How a single quiet sentence to a flight attendant can make solo travel safer and more comfortable. None of this is about scaring you away from flying. It's about arming you with the information. The system won't always explain clearly. When you know how things actually work now, you get your power back. Flights after 70 are absolutely still possible. They just require preparation, clarity, and the confidence to speak up early and calmly. The most important mindset shift you can make is this. Too many seniors feel ashamed to ask for help, or worry they're holding others up, or think they should be able to cope the way they did at 50. But the airport you're walking into in 2026 is not the same airport you used 20 years ago. Today, managing it yourself doesn't mean struggling in silence. It means planning ahead, using the systems that exist, and speaking up before a small issue becomes a crisis. When you do that, flying can feel structured, predictable, even calm again. I've watched prepared seniors in their 70s and 80s glide through the airport, documents in order, assistance arranged, boarding early, medications packed correctly, while others just as capable in everyday life stumble through unnecessary obstacles simply because no one ever sat them down and explained the new reality. Knowledge is the difference. Now you have it. Before we end, I'd like to hear from you. What worries you most about flying as an older traveler? Is it the long walks, the security lines, managing medications, being rushed, or something else entirely? Share it in the comments. I do read them, and they help me decide what to cover next, so that what you hear is genuinely useful in your real life. If this helped you, please share it with someone you care about, a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, a friend planning a trip. A few minutes of information can prevent missed weddings, missed holidays, and a lot of unnecessary stress. And if you'd like more calm, clear guidance like this, consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps this kind of information reach the people who quietly need it most. Thank you for spending this time.